Okay, so if you look at Epictetus's Enchiridion, um, really these are meant to be read a little bit at a time, kind of like daily meditation kind of things, and they're therefore on all kinds of different subjects. But if you keep in mind the Stoic idea that the universe is ordered, and because it's ordered, it is rational, and that people have reason, that means people can have insight into the universal order, which means if we keep our thoughts and actions in accord with the universal order, then we will be good. That's basically the logic. The very first passage, what do you call these things? Aphorisms, passages of the book on page 340 really sort of sums up what's going on in Stoic philosophy. And it can kind of serve to lay the groundwork to kind of understand the rest of them. So let's spend some time and pay attention to the first one. This is what he says. Some things are up to us, some are not up to us. Our opinions are up to us, and our impulses, desires, aversions, in short, whatever is our own doing. Our bodies are not up to us, nor our possessions, reputations, or public offices. That is, whatever is not our own doing. So he divides things into up to us and not up to us. And this is kind of enlightening. So what is up to us versus what is not up to us. And he says the things that are up to us are opinions, impulses, desires. So opinions, impulses, and desires. Okay. And then he continues and he says, whatever is our own doing. All right. Then there are some things that are not up to us. What he says is our bodies, our reputations. Is that what he says? No, bodies, possessions, reputations, and offices. Okay, for offices, he literally means offices in the government. He's was alive in Rome, and he does mean the career of a public man. So rather than offices, I'm going to use the more modern word career. The difference is today not all of our careers necessarily are about public office, but in Rome it was. And what is true about the things that are not up to us is that they are not ours. Not our own. Okay. Then he continues, the things that are up to us are by nature free, unhindered, unimpeded. The things not up to us are weak, enslaved, hindered, not our own. So these are our own and free, and these are not our own and enslaved. Okay, so the trick is, let's try to understand this. So when he says our bodies are not up to us, we might think, well, we have control over our bodies, right? We could become healthy, we could run, we could exercise. But if you think about what you inherit, right? If you think about things like, the color of your skin, your height, whether you're born, how you're born, all those things, you really don't have very much control over your body at all. And eventually our bodies are all going to die. So while you may, tan your body, you may get tattoos, or you may keep it healthier or not healthier, those sorts of decisions, which by the way are based on having certain types of body, are really quite insignificant if you consider how much of your body was determined for you by what you inherited from your parents. Now, in terms of possessions, we might again say, well, our possessions, that is the stuff that we own, right, is really ours. But if you think about the fact that your possessions take money to acquire and money to keep, what you call yours actually could be taken from you if you stop making the payments. Also, it can be taken from you by thieves. Or you could think of something like eminent domain, where even if you have, the legal standing, you have legal property, it could be taken away from you if your society decides that it's better for you not to have that private property, but for the community to have it. And so possessions are only as good as a society which is willing to protect them and a level of wealth that can acquire and maintain them. So your reputation is the next thing he talks about. So your reputation, ultimately, though, is based on others. Literally, when we talk about reputation, we talk about how others think about us. Therefore, the reputation is not really our own, per se. Instead, it is in the perceivers themselves. And lastly, he talks about public offices, or what we'll call careers. And the idea is that what we do for a job or for a career depends on things far larger than ourselves. Take, for instance, this idea. If, suppose you're going to college because you want to get a good job. First of all, not everyone can go to college. So right away, that means that the fact that there are colleges are because government built them and put them there, and then governments underwrite most of the financial lending that goes on for students to go to school, and governments also dictate curriculums. So without a government to create and allow students access to universities, there would not be many. Also, think about, just because you have a degree doesn't mean you get a job. You still have to go through the way to find a job, and to even if you're in a certain field, if you want to get into nursing and become a nurse, you still have to go out and fill out applications, get interviews, and that sort of thing. And when you are in the process of interviewing, you don't control who hires you. Someone else controls, and they may or may not hire you. And then lastly, the fact that a place might even have a job in the first place to hire you for is dependent on an expanding economy. If we have a really stagnant economy with large unemployment, nobody's going to be hiring anybody. So at the end of the day, if you think about it, careers, reputations, possessions, and even our bodies are dependent on things that are ultimately not up to us. We don't decide our genes. We don't decide the time in which we're born. We don't decide whether our society will allow us to have things, or whether our society is one that allows us to have possessions, or whether we even live in a society at a certain time that has the things that we want. Not to mention, we're not going to take them with us. We will die. Reputations aren't up to us because essentially they are other people's opinions of us. And while we can influence that, we can't control it. And lastly, our careers aren't up to us because in the same way that you may wish to be a blacksmith in today's economy, you're likely not going to. So what is up to us then, he says? So what is up to us is opinion, impulse, desires, in other words, the way we react, the way that we think about and react to things. So our reaction to the world is what's ours. We can form our own perspectives. When he says impulses, I think what he means here is you don't necessarily control every impulse, but you can choose which impulses lead you to action. And desire, we can educate our desires to desire things that are good to desire. So in other words, you can almost think in terms of this. The inner world is up to us. The outer world is not so much. And one of the reasons that Epictetus is explaining things in this regard, remember back to the movie Gladiator. If you think of it, a guy like Maximus, physically a good guy, possessions, he had a nice villa, a nice estate, right, with a family and everything, reputation as a good general, loved by his troops, and a good career. He had, become a very influential general. And all those things were taken away from him in one act because Commodus didn't like him, and Commodus feared what he would do. So in one instance, a proud and good general had his entire family murdered and taken from him, his estate condemned, and even his life, his body forfeit. Now, granted, he escaped and the whole 9 yards, but the problem is that kind of stuff can happen in an outer world. All this misfortune, all this bad stuff can happen because it's not up to us. So we can't control these things. What we can control, though, is the inner life, that is, our own reaction to the things that happen here in the physical world. And in that reaction is where we can find what's called freedom from disturbance. And freedom from disturbance, or ataraxia, it's called in Greek, is ultimately where we get a sense of happiness. And so if we want to be happy, happiness really is freedom from disturbance. And freedom from disturbance comes in this. If we're always worried about this stuff down here, we're always going to be full of worry. And as we worry, we're not going to be free from disturbance, because worry is a way to disturb us. So the whole thing with Epictetus is we want to find a way to concern ourselves less with this stuff and more with this stuff, because this stuff we can control. And if we can control this, we won't be disturbed. And if we're not disturbed, we'll be happy. And our happiness will allow us to live in tune with nature. So that's kind of what that first little aphorism means. And you can see this theme, the theme of detaching yourself from everything external. That theme works its way through all the rest.